We are just about 3 weeks away from spring practice in Happy Valley. We want to get a jump on the Penn State offense and the defense and special teams. We will start on the offensive side of the ball with Marty Leap from Penn State Rivals. Marty, how you doing?
Pretty good, Mark. How about you?
We are doing just fine. We are going to go to the quarterback position, of course, and all eyes on Drew Aller. Unfortunately, the last we saw of Drew Aller was, hands on the helmet and a poor decision with the game on the line and Penn State in between thinking, okay, do we run out the clock and go to overtime or do we give it to our gifted thrower to try to lead us down the field? And obviously he made a bad throw. But let's start with Drew Aller because to me, much improved throughout the season. We saw the decision making, the leadership just seemed more convicted in throwing the football and really showed off his arm talent.
Yeah, I agree. And, there's a lot of unfortunate reasons why Drew's last throw of the year ended the way it did. Obviously, none better than the fact that, that throw probably cost them a trip to the national championship game. But I think a big part of it is a lot of people are going to remember that and not the strides you mentioned that Drew made. The decision maker, especially the leadership. He's much more vocal as a leader on the field, which I think the team really needed from him this year. And they got that. And, it's part of the reason why I think expectations are going to be so high going into the fall. That's why you've seen a lot of way too early preseason polls with Penn State into the discussion as the preseason number one team is because of Drew Aller and those strides he's made. There's never been a doubt about the arm talent. He can make any throw in the field. But last year we saw a lot of strides in the mental aspect of it and that sort of thing where you need to see it. And it came. Again, it's unfortunate the season ended the way it did. Drew would probably tell you that's one of the worst decisions and throws he's ever made in his entire life, let alone his collegiate career. But yeah, he definitely made a lot of strides with his ability to go through progressions. He was a lot more aggressive with his legs, which made a big difference. Big time leadership, the accuracy improved. He improved in every area. And like I said, there's a reason why going into next year, you look at Penn State as one of the 3 to 4 favorites to win the national championship, and why Drew Aller is going to be playing with the opportunity to, maybe be the number one overall pick next April because he's going to be in discussion for QB1, and QB1's always in the discussion for number one overall pick. So, yeah, he definitely made a lot of strides. There's still some improvements you want to see. Obviously, year two in an offense tends to go a long way for any quarterback. So I'm sure year two in Andy Koldernicki's offense will just naturally lead to some improvements from Drew. But, yeah, it was definitely a year of a lot more growth and a lot more improvement than the negative.
In addition to losing Bo Prabula as the backup quarterback and a guy that obviously would step into the lineup if anything happened to Aller as an experienced guy who got meaningful snaps, those 10 to 12 reps against good teams, do they really miss anything in regards to those packages that he would run? Again, I know that we had the conversation when he made the decision to opt out of the playoffs, and it was my initial thought that this may not necessarily be a bad thing, that they just let Drew Aller be the quarterback from 20-yard line into the end zone and just not mess around with all this other business.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought there were times last year they tried to force the Bo package too often. There'd be times you'd see Drew in the offense getting into a rhythm, and then they go to the Bo Prabula package, and not even necessarily that the package itself didn't work because you might get a 5-yard run on first down, but you got Drew in the offense out of rhythm. And it was frustrating at times to watch. I know a lot of fans are frustrated with it at times. So I agree with that. And I think, too, if there's ever a time, I thought where the Bo Prabula package was most advantageous is, if you needed that true 1.5 yards, 2 yards, or it was too long to run a sneak, where you could have the extra blocker, essentially, play 11 on 11. But you can do that in a Wildcat formation with Katron Allen, with Nicholas Singleton. I think you're going to see, not to the extent they did it with Tyler Warren, obviously, because he was just a special once-in-a-lifetime kind of guy. But Luke Reynolds, who's going to be the next great tight end at Penn State, like Warren, played high school quarterback, so Reynolds would be comfortable taking a snap if you'd want to do similar packages there where, hey, we need that 1.5 yards. We want to play 11 on 11. Let's go get it. So I don't think they're going to miss that. I think they didn't miss it in the playoff, right? I mean, the offense was just fine against SMU and Boise. And against Notre Dame, I don't think having Bo Prabula would have made a difference. But yeah, they didn't miss it in the playoff. I don't think they'll miss it next year. And part of it too is you have all off season, again, whether you want to do it with one of your backs, whether you want to do it with Luke Reynolds or somebody else, you have all offseason to scheme that up and plan it now too. It's not like it was where when he left, what was it, 10 days before the SMU game, and you were stuck trying to come up with a backup plan. You have from now until August to figure that out.
Ethan Grunkenmeyer is the guy that has stars next to his name coming out of high school. So is he definitely the backup, and how does the rest of the room look?
Yeah, Grunkenmeyer definitely going to be quarterback too. I mean, I know I've said it before. I think I've even said it on here. I always felt that Grunkenmeyer was probably the next guy up anyway, even if Bo Bula sticks around. Very, very special arm talent, not to the level of Drew Aller. A few guys are, but Grunkenmeyer was a top 100 guy in high school as well. Worked with the same high school quarterback coach as Drew Aller. And, I think he's a good mix of Drew and Bo. He's a better athlete than Drew, not quite the athlete of Bo, but a better thrower than Bo, even though he's not quite the thrower of Drew, that Drew is. So I think you're going to see him get a lot of run this year, obviously in mop-up duty and that sort of thing. I don't think you're going to see special packages for him or anything of the sort, but I know he's a guy too that last year the staff, a lot of the feedback behind closed doors was that he was ahead of schedule in the eyes of the staff. So I think that they're going to be very comfortable having him as QB2, and I think he's got a very bright future ahead of him when Drew does go pro after next year. And then behind him, you're going to have Jackson Smolik, who will be a redshirt sophomore, a redshirt freshman, excuse me. But he's coming off a knee injury. He missed I think it was a knee. It was either knee, ankle, something lower body that he missed all of last season. And then behind him will be Beckham Kritza, who's a true freshman, who, kind of came in as a little bit of a project when he gets to campus. Super arm talent, but very raw. But, I mean, ultimately, and this is no knock on Grunk because I think he's going to be a very good quarterback. If you look at that quarterback room next year, you're going to go as far as Drew Aller takes you. And I know you can say that about most teams at quarterback, especially when you've got a quarterback with, the unlimited ceiling that a guy like Drew Aller has. Just look at how the season ended. Notre Dame was probably his worst game of the year. And look what happened. If Drew plays even mediocre in that game, they would have won. They would have been in the national championship game. I don't think they would have beaten Ohio State, but you'd much rather get there and lose than not get there at all. So, again, you're going to go as far as Drew takes you. But, if something would happen in the middle of the season where he's got to miss a game or two, they're going to be more than comfortable going to Grunkenmeyer. And I think long-term, they're going to be very happy to hand the reins to Grunkenmeyer when the time comes.
We are breaking down the Penn State offense. We got the right guy to do it. Marty Leap from Penn State Rivals. You see his Twitter handle on the screen. You can follow his work right there. Penn State gets it going mid-March in Happy Valley. And these two running backs that we've seen now for 2 full seasons, they're what you would think is going to be a rarity in college football going forward. The two guys are going to stick together, be on the same team, share the load for an entire career. And of course, they have yet to show that, but they certainly seem content in continuing on their careers at Penn State. And of course, we're talking about Nick Singleton and Katron Allen.
Yeah, and, the staff, last year as the season went on, there was always quiet confidence that they were going to be able to get Nick Singleton back for one more year. And I don't think anyone expected Katron Allen to be back. I think everyone thought Allen was going to go pro. And then he decided to return. And, you now look at ahead to 2025 with, arguably the best running back duo in the country behind what we're going to get into is a very deep, talented, experienced offensive line. And, you mentioned it being a rarity in college football, which it is. But I also think, if you're Penn State, what you sell to these two, what you sell to backs in the future, hey, look at shelf life of backs in the NFL. You come here, yeah, you're splitting carries with a guy, but look at last year. Katron Allen had 220 carries, Nicholas Singleton 172. Look at a guy like Ashton Genty. What did he have? 400 or 500 carries. That's a lot less tread on those tires when you get to the NFL. And I think that can be beneficial. And one thing that's going to be fun with Singleton and Allen as well is if they both stay healthy, they're going to finish their careers number 1 and number 2 in school history in rushing yards. They're both within, I think Allen is within just a hair over 1,000 yards, and Singleton's about 900 yards. Maybe they're flipped, but both of them are about 900 to 1,000 yards away from the school record. So if they stay healthy, they're going to finish 1-2 in school history in rushing yards. And I just think that's a really cool thing to have two guys who play 4 years together, 4 very successful years. Well, you still be 4 very successful years with what the expectations will be for 2025, and to finish 1-2 in career rushing yards, especially at a school like Penn State that, it's not like Penn State isn't known for producing great running backs or something. So, you look at all the backs that have come through Penn State in the last 40 years to say you're 1-2 all time in rushing yards and you did it playing together. That's a pretty cool thing. So that'll just be one of those kind of under the radar things for fans to watch this year.
Who sizes up as the number 3 guy or anybody else that is significant in this room?
Yeah, two true freshmen from this past year to watch, Corey Smith and Quentin Martin. Corey Smith got a decent amount of playing time in his 4 games to preserve the red shirt in mop-up duty this year when he could. Averaged, I think, around 7 yards a carry. Showed some really good stuff, some really good burst, some really good wiggle. And then Quentin Martin was banged up last year, battled some injuries. Excuse me. There's a real possibility had he been healthy, he might have been the 3rd running back last year and saw some more playing time. Former 5-star recruit from the Pittsburgh area. So again, 2 backs are very high on. And I think what excites them most with that duo is Corey Smith is another guy who I think came in ahead of schedule. And he's from Wisconsin. I know when he committed to Penn State, a lot of people were surprised because, hey, you have a 4-star running back from Wisconsin. You're going to go to Wisconsin. And he didn't. He picked Penn State, showed some really good things last year. So, I mean, the future of the running back room, even with the change of running back coach, is still in really good hands with Corey Smith and with Quentin Martin in that room.
This wide receiver room, Marty, has taken a beating from Big Ten and national media. I don't know what the locals think of it, but it was always a target of, okay, this room is not good enough, and this is why this team is not excelling to the very top of college football, though getting to within a final play of getting to the national championship game is about just as close as you can get. Kyron Hudson's a guy that made remarkable catches at USC. The overall stats were not overwhelming. Trey Wallace is gone. You mentioned to me before we started to record Amari Evans as well. Do you think that there is potential there to take another step toward being a better room than what it's been in the last few years?
I mean, first and foremost, it's tough to be worse. I know Drew didn't play great against Notre Dame, but the receivers didn't help him. Early in the game, they made a concentrated effort to get the receivers involved, and they just couldn't get open. Even that interception at the end of the game was a poor decision and a poor throw. If you watch that play back, the defensive back ran Amari Evans' route for him. He was in a better position to catch the ball than Evans was. So a lot of that did fall on the receivers as well. I do think the room is going to be better. You mentioned Kyron Hudson. I know the staff's very high on him. There's some belief within the staff that USC didn't necessarily use him to the best of his ability. So we'll see what happens. I do think it helps that he's got experience in the Big Ten. Devontae Ross, another transfer they brought in, I'm really intrigued by. Put up some pretty monster numbers last year with over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns for Troy. I mean, it's Troy, but the early feedback on his testing results since he got to campus is that he is a little bit better of an athlete than the staff thought. So I think he's going to help. And some of these younger guys, Tyser Denmark is a guy that everybody around Penn State's high on. He'll be a redshirt freshman this year from the Philadelphia area. Made some nice plays last year when he got in his 4 games. I think Denmark is a guy who a year in the program, in the weight room, refining his route running is going to go a long way for him. I think he'll improve the wide receiver room this year. And under the radar guy, just to kind of keep an eye on, is Caden Saunders. He'll be a redshirt junior. He's a former top 50 recruit. I know people in the program thought Saunders was going to make an impact last year, and he was just hurt all year. And now that you can get Saunders healthy, I think there's still some hope there that he can give you something out of the slot. But, I mean, ultimately, the wide receiver room is trending in the right direction. They signed a really strong wide receiver class this past recruiting cycle. Their 2026 receiver class is off to an incredible start. Of the 25 class they signed, Matthew Alton, going to be a true freshman out of Virginia, I think is a guy to watch. He definitely needs to work on his route running, but he has game-breaking speed and playmaker ability. And with where this room's at, I think they try and find a way, even if it's on like tunnel screens, end arounds, just find a way to get the ball in his hands this year. So I think the receiver room is definitely capable of taking a step forward. I think if they're going to, next year be in the national championship game instead of being one play away, they're going to need that receiver room to take a step forward. But I think the one saving grace or whatever it is for the receiver room, even with losing Tyler Warren, this tight end room is still as good as any in the Big Ten and up there with the best in the country. So I think that's going to help a lot as well. But I do think with Hudson, with Ross, with Tysier, Denmark, I think that's the best, should be at least the best trio they've had since 2022 when they had the trio of what would have been Mitch Tinsley, Parker Washington, and Keandre Lambert-Smith. So I do think that there's room there for growth with the receiver room. And again, it can't be worse. It just can't be worse than it's been the last 2 years. And I understand a lot of Penn State people and fans are going to be, hey, I'll believe when I see it. And I totally understand that. But I also think if you look at this year as opposed to last year or the year before, for example, you mentioned Kyron Hudson. He wasn't always consistent at USC, but clearly the talent's there, right? We've seen him make big plays at the Power 4 level. We've seen him make big plays in the Big Ten. Devontae Ross, yeah, he's coming from Troy, but he was extremely productive in the Sun Belt. And that included he went bonkers against Iowa last year, returned a punch, touchdown, caught 2 touchdowns. So I think that alone gives you a little more confidence because you at least have guys who have done it, and including Hudson, who has done it at the Power 4 level. So I think that gives you a little added confidence. And again, I think Tysier Denmark, his school that he went to in Philadelphia, Imhotep Charter, did not allow early enrollees. I think had he been able to be an early enrollee last year, we would have seen him on the field this past year. But the fact he couldn't get to campus in June probably held him back. So I think, that, again, that trio, again, you need to see it to believe it, but I think that trio can really raise the floor of this receiver room, which is really all you need right now, especially with a quarterback like Drew Aller and with the running game you'll have. And then that higher ceiling is coming when these 2025 guys kind of get more seasoning, when this 2026 class gets to campus. But I do think the room should take a step forward this year. I'm more confident in it taking a step forward this year than I was last year.
We go live, everyone, on the national channel every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Take your calls and talk about the news of the day and one big topic in college football. So make that a staple of your day, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And we got Marty Leap here breaking down Penn State. And as you hit on, I had just looked that up because I was curious with Ross coming in from Troy if he had any decent numbers against a good defense in the Power 5. And again, Iowa always brings one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. And like you mentioned, 5 for 142 for 2 touchdowns in that game against the Hawkeyes in his only Power 5 opponent, at least this last season. You mentioned Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins. Is he back as well?
Yeah, Khalil Dinkins will be back. I mean, he'll be the quote unquote starter at tight end. I think you're going to see a lot of 12 personnel again. So most games you'll see 2 starters at tight end. I think Dinkins, there's definitely some untapped potential there for his ability to catch the ball. Good genes, Darnell Dinkins kid. So definitely some good genes there. I think that he can have improved receiving numbers this year. I mean, when you're with Tyler Warren the last 2 years, there weren't going to be a ton of opportunities to get the ball at tight end. But I think you'll see those numbers go up. Reynolds is an absolute freak athlete at tight end. I mean, if that name sounds familiar to anyone watching this, he's the kid who had the fake punt against Minnesota on that last drive when they went down and put the game away. That was Reynolds, and he was the one who took the snap and ran. So that's him. And I think 2 other names to watch. Andrew Rappelier, who would have played a big role this past year, got hurt very early in the West Virginia game, missed the rest of the season. I know when he got to campus, the thought was that Tyler Warren aside, he's the best like 2-way tight end between runner and blocker they've had since Pat Fryermuth. And then Andrew Olish, who is a top 100 borderline 5-star tight end coming in, will be a true freshman. I think you're going to see them potentially give Olish some run as well. So again, that tight end room, there's a ton of talent there. It's not as proven. I mean, Dinkins has played a lot of football the last 3 years. So I shouldn't say it's not as proven. It's just he hasn't had the ball thrown to him. When he has, he's been a legitimate threat. And I think Reynolds and Rappelier and Olish are all guys with sky-high ceilings. So I think the tight end room will continue to be a strength for State, and that'll help offset some of the concerns at receiver.
We talk recruiting and transfer portal live every Tuesday with Leanne Herring, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's on our new recruiting channel right here at the Voice of College Football. Marty Leap, of course, here from Rivals on the Penn State side to break down the Nittany Lions. And I got to say, Marty, when I break into Phil Steele's preseason publication, I am expecting what you told me before we started to record to be featured prominently, because I don't know that I've heard this, where everybody's back from a three deep along the offensive line except for one guy.
Yeah, you look at Penn State's offensive line. Left tackle Drew Shelton is back. Left guard Vegaone is back. Your center Nick Dawkins is back. Your right tackle Anthony Donka, who might be your best overall lineman, will be back. And then you have Nolan Rucci, who played a ton when Donka got hurt last year. He'll be back. You have, like I said, the only player in the three deep from last year who moved on to the NFL was Sal Wormley. So you bring back just all kinds of depth. And I'm trying to think what those four I mentioned, Nolan Rucci and JB Nelson. So I know you're bringing back at least 6 guys with starting experience. Of Cooper Cousin, who was a 5-star recruit who played a ton as a true freshman last year that they're uber high on, will step in at right guard. And to add to that, you brought in TJ Shanahan, who is a freshman in the SEC, played in 12 games on Texas A&M's offensive line as a transfer. So you returned everybody in your three deep except for one guy, but you replaced him with a guy who played in 12 games in the SEC last year. So, no schmuck himself. So yeah, this offensive line, you have to give a big tip of the cap to Phil Trautwein. I think he is quietly, maybe not quietly, because Alabama tried to poach him last offseason. NFL teams tried this offseason. He's become one of the absolute best offensive line coaches in football. Everybody saw what he did with Olufashinu. Caden Wallace quietly had a strong rookie year with the New England Patriots this year. And now this offensive line that you're setting on now, you're going to have a lot of guys who are in that room are going to go on to have long, successful NFL careers. Trautwein has earned every penny that he has gotten from Penn State. And I can tell you with some of the programs, NFL teams have come sniffing, he's making a good penny at Penn State. But yeah, tip of the cap to him. He's done a tremendous job with that room. It should be an absolute strength for this team next year. And honestly, I think that's a big reason why you go into the year thinking, you've got a shot to not just win the Big Ten, but maybe win the whole thing, because it starts in the trenches, right? Look at that Michigan team 2 years ago. A big reason why they won the national championship was they just bullied everybody with their offensive line, and Penn State's offensive line should be in a similar spot this fall. So, yeah, I'm with you. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this where, especially a program the caliber of Penn State with the expectations of Penn State, brings back that much depth, talent, and experience across their front offensive line. But, man, it should be as someone who's always appreciated good offensive line play as a former high school offensive lineman, I just love watching offensive line just comes out and punches people in the mouth. And, I think Penn State fans in general are that way when you just kind of look at the history of this program and some of the offensive linemen who have come through here. But, yeah, it should be a lot of fun to watch that group in the fall.